I'll begin first with Sarah Denman. Sarah Denman was born and raised in Canova, West Virginia. She attended CK High School and then earned a BA and an MA degree from Marshall University. Sarah taught high school for 6 years before joining the faculty at Marshall in 1975. While working at Marshall, she earned an EDD from WVU. Dr. Denman served as Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Marshall from 1996 until her retirement in 2008. Her entire life has been dedicated to education. She also has a remarkable record of community involvement and volunteerism. She was named the 2007 Citizen of the Year by the Herald-Dispatch, and she was the 2017 Huntington Museum of Art Volunteer of the Year. Sarah famously asserted when she was provost that she didn't think we could ask our certain students to be civically engaged unless we were ourselves. The list of organizations she has served is as remarkable as it is long. It includes the Huntington Museum of Art, the West Virginia Humanities Council, Hospice, the Cabell Huntington Hospital Foundation, Barnett Child Care Center, Branches Contact, and much, much more. I'm very happy to introduce again Sarah Denman to our forum.
It's been 11 years since I've spoke here at Marshall, so I hope I'm not too rusty at this. It's hard to believe I've been retired 11 years. But you know, when Montserrat asked me to talk about this, I actually did a little research. That's what we do in academics. And when you look up civic responsibility, it's very simple. It is what citizens do. It's what we are required to do. And I looked a little further and tried to think about what are some of the things that are a part of our civic responsibility. So I did a little more research, and they were interesting. One of them had to do with that as part of our civic responsibility, we're supposed to support and defend the Constitution. That sounds really important and a big responsibility, but I think many of us do that all the time. I would say that in this audience there are people who have marched, who have protested, who've written letters to the paper, who've done op-ed pieces, who have stood up and spoken out when we needed to do that. I think of the quote that Martin Luther King said, that at the end of our lives we will not remember the words of our enemies. We will only remember the silence of our friends. We have a responsibility to defend the rights that the Constitution affords us. Now, in order to do that, we have to participate in the democratic process, which means we have to vote. Both of my grandmothers were born in the 1890s. They had to wait till their mid-20s to vote in their first election. I mean, we take that for granted today. We can vote. We don't even have to think about it. But many of us don't. I think that's something we need to be more vigilant about. We need to immerse ourselves in the democratic process. And I would throw a challenge out today, particularly to women. Women fought very hard for the right to vote. We have the majority in this country. We have the power of the vote. So I would challenge you, don't squander your right to vote, male or female. When there's an election, vote. That's part of civic responsibility. But you need to be informed too. Being informed about the issues in your town, your community, your state, the nation. I mean, I'm a news junkie. I watch the news all the time. Sometimes I have to take a break. But I watch the news because I want to be informed. I have a kind of a bumper sticker that's on my refrigerator that says, I'd rather be informed than opinionated. And I take that seriously. I think if we're going to be part of this democratic process and we're going to engage in civic responsibility, we have to be informed. We also have to respect the rights, the beliefs, and the opinions of others. We don't have to agree with them, but we have to respect them. I'm reading the most interesting book now called I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening to You. And it is an interesting perspective on getting us back to civility. But we need to have respect. And lastly, we need to participate in our local communities. I really believe this. Civic engagement, to me, service is what it's all about. I remember from a rhetoric and public address class that I had here many decades ago to a professor with the name of Ben Hope. And he gave us a quote from Aristotle that said, when we learn about citizenship, only then do we flourish as humans. It enhances our humanness. And I really think that is very true. We need to ask ourselves every day, are we making a difference in people's lives? You know, when Martin Luther King wrote his famous letters from the Birmingham jail, he said the greatest question of our generation would be, what did we do for others? That's as true today as it was when he wrote that. I'm a child of the 60s. I started the 7th grade in 1960. I graduated from high school in 66. I graduated from Marshall in 69. I got to tell you that decade defines your life. And because of that, I was introduced to many writers and many speakers at that time. But I remember when I was a senior in high school, someone gave me a copy of The Prophet. And I had never read that before. But there was something that Gibran said that has always stuck with me the rest of my life. He said, I went to sleep at night and I dreamed of a life of joy. I woke up and found it was a life of service. So I served, and I found that service is what brings you joy. I do believe that. I think that those are the kinds of things that make us human. My parents were people of no means. You talk about living from paycheck to paycheck. That's how we were raised. We had gardens and we raised chickens and pigs and we grew our own food or we raised our own food. So my parents did not have wealth, but they had principles. And they taught us that you take care of your neighbor. You help. You become publicly engaged. Everything in the community, the school or the church, whatever it was, my sister and I would be right there with them. We just thought that's what everybody did. And when I had my daughter, I tried to raise her the same way. My husband and I were committed to really civic engagement, and particularly to service. So everything I did, from the time she was really tiny, I did it with her. She went with me. We have to be an example. You know, it was so much that when she was little, no matter what they would say at school or wherever it was, you know, her first answer would be, my mom will do it, you know. And that works well, except for certain situations. We were at the Cincinnati Zoo one time, and we were at the herpetology house, and they wanted a volunteer from the audience to let them wrap a boa constrictor around them. And she jumped up at 5 years of age and said, my mom will do it, my mom will do it. Well, I did. You can't shame your daughter, you know. So I let them wrap that snake around me, and I have the picture to prove it. But it doesn't matter what it is. You have to show others what it's like to be civically engaged. You know, I stand on the shoulders of a generation before me. Many of the young people here tonight in this audience, you will stand on the shoulders of the current generation. Our lives will not go on forever. I will not live forever. Modern medicine is great, but I will not live forever. But perhaps the legacy I will leave will be one of service, and that legacy will live. And people will remember that service is important because someone thought it was important. There's a Hebrew saying, labor, labor. I believe I got it right. which means from one generation to the next generation. We need to pass on to the next generation the ideals that we were taught in our generation. You know, service is a lifetime. It's not a single act. How often we hear people say, well, I did this. How many times did you do it? Who did you do it for? And why did you do it? We need to remember that service starts with a single act, but then it should be for a lifetime. Wherever you can make a difference. When I took my first job as an administrator, I was very serious about taking that job, and I hated leaving the classroom. And I looked up in the dictionary what administration or administrate means, and right there in the definition is to serve. Good administrators every day try to make the jobs of those that work with them better, or they're not a good administrator. They need to be trying to help people make their lives better no matter what walk of life you're in. That's what it means. It means letting your life be an example to other people. You know, we need to remember what those who have gone before us have taught us, and we need to live that in our life every day. I was very privileged several years ago to go to a trip to Israel, visiting some engineering schools and also visiting some friends. And we rented a car and we drove throughout the entire country. I mean, still can't believe I did that. I just rented a car and started driving. But we saw so many different things and we heard so many different stories. But one of the ones that really stayed with me was when we traveled around. Israel is a desert and they depend on water for their livelihood. And we went to the Dead Sea, and it's huge, it's mammoth, but nothing lives in the Dead Sea. Nothing. And then we saw the River Jordan and the Sea of Galilee, and those small bodies of water, through irrigation, feed a nation. And the guide was talking to me and he said, I often think in life, will you be a taker like the Dead Sea, or will you be a giver like the River Jordan? Will you give to people in your life, or will you only take? A few years ago, I was watching the Kennedy Center Honors, and they gave an award to Cecily Tyson. And she talked about how she was raised by her mother, and she was raised in the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. And her mother, now I don't know about your church, but her mother in that church had her pew. And so when her mother died, she put a plaque on her mom's pew that had the words from the song Blessed Assurance, which the chorus says, this is my story, this is my song. I've often thought at the end of our lives, what will people say was our story? What was our song? What were we passionate about? What drove us to serve, to be civically engaged, to make life better for other people? You know, we all have a story and we'll all have a song. My hope for you is that it's one of civic engagement and it's one of service, and that you not only serve because it's the right thing to do, you serve because it is the thing you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. That was really wonderful. Our next speaker is Audie M. Perry, Jr. Audie Perry serves as Executive Director of the Heritage Farm Foundation, which operates West Virginia's first Smithsonian affiliate, the Heritage Farm Museum and Village in Huntington. Established by his parents, A. Michael and Henriella Perry, the award-winning Heritage Farm strives to share Appalachia's proud, rugged past in ways that inspire and embolden a vibrant future. Prior to his current role at Heritage Farm, Audie practiced law for over 18 years. He is now of counsel with the Dinsmore Law Firm. Audie is very active in the community and the state. He is a board member of the Huntington Regional Chamber of Commerce, Cabell-Huntington Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the West Virginia Archives and History Commission. His past service is extensive, including the Marshall University Foundation and the West Virginia Baptist Convention Executive Committee. Audie enjoys sharing life's grand adventure with his family and his friends, and it's our pleasure to welcome Audie to the Robert C. Byrd Forum.
Thank you, Montserrat. I'd be remiss if I didn't begin by just saying how humbling it is to speak at a civic responsibility forum named after Robert C. Byrd. For those who had the blessing to meet him, that is a public servant. He was a beautiful man. He loved this country. He loved this state. He loved this university, and he loved the people. And he worked doggedly hard for that. And so it's kind of humbling when you're sitting here many years afterwards still talking about a legacy that someone left based upon the life they lived, serving others. Now, not all of us will serve in a public capacity like Robert C. Byrd did. For some who are able to do that, that is the blessing of a democracy. But there is a role to play for all of us. And I think that's the interesting part for today's conversation. Especially, looks like most of my college-age friends have deviated to this side. There's a few sprinkled there, but so I'm gonna, so you have so many years ahead, and these fascinating years called the college years, are setting the groundwork for so many things you're going to do in your life. What do you're not allowed to stay quiet when I talk. So one of the things I want, what did you expect when you came today? What is civic responsibility? I mean, other than earning extra credit, maybe. What did you come to hear about today? All right, by the way, nobody likes to speak in public, and we're all afraid of each other that we're going to make fun of. That doesn't happen in here. This is like one of those sacred places. Nobody's going to, there's no cameras. Oh, sorry, except for that one. So don't use cuss words or anything that'll embarrass your mom. But when you came to the talk on civic responsibility, what did you think we were going to talk about today? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Lady says voting, because that is one that is written into our documents for our country. Yes. Anybody else? The role you're supposed to have in your community. Good. What else? One more. Pressure. No. Is there another one across the way? Yes, sir. Great. All true. Good answers, right? If your professor's here, give them an A. They're good. They're doing good. So I want everyone to think of something you've accomplished. Take a few minutes. Something you've accomplished. May have been that bowling trophy in 3rd grade. May have been a paper that you wrote, a book you've written, an office you won. Everybody got it? Something they've accomplished. Raising a family, that's a great one. Good job on yours. Yeah. Raising a family. Give me some other examples. What's some other accomplishments? We're all self-effacing Appalachians here, so we won't want to claim any credit. So you can tell me about what your friend did if you want. Or you can be bold enough to claim your own. Eagle Scout. Excellent. Good. Education, right? So what you're doing here is an accomplishment. Absolutely. Give me one more. Yes, ma'am. Excellent, right? So here's what I want. And let's be honest, this is a very blessed room, is it not? Yeah. just accept that as true. I'll give you that one. If you're sitting in this room, you've lived a very blessed life that many, many people in this world will not get to enjoy. That's probably part of that civic responsibility as well. I'll submit that. But everything you hold in your brain that you've accomplished, did you accomplish it by yourself? No. The education Dan mentioned, right? Man. And so if you're sitting in this room, you've been blessed by an education. Think of all the teachers who poured into your life, right? Lesson plans, buying stuff that nobody paid for, right? Reading your papers, and then the mentors, right? Your parents, the people in the custodial and maintenance staff that made your building work, the cook staff that made you that enabled you to feed yourself while you're, all those people that made your education possible. Down to raising your family, like Miss Linda said, right? You did not do that alone. You learned that from your parents and people who came alongside you to tell you how to do things in the middle of the night when you don't know how to stop that child from crying, right? Eagle Scouts, all those men and women who've poured into your life, who took time, that volunteered their own time and money, and gasoline, and errant arrows into their arms and hammers onto their toes, to give you that experience. Same with the Girl Scouts, right? All those things, someone, actually many people sacrificed to get you where you are today. There is no accomplishment that we can claim as our own. In fact, I would submit that where you are today has a whole lot more to do with things outside your control than the things you do control. The countless hours of people that you don't even know that have created this place for us to even have today's thing, we don't even know. How old is the university now? 1837, right? Five generations have gone through to get us here today. And the reason I go through that, so it's about the why, right? We know we've been blessed, and so we ought to give back, right? Almost all of us have been ingrained to who much is given, much is expected, and all that. But why? So that the song may continue. Right? We have freely received the blessings and hard work of other people. We must freely give it back, or the system breaks. It does not work. If you do not continue that song, if you're not willing to put the boa constrictor around your neck, the song doesn't go on. And I just mentioned that, obviously coming from Heritage Farm standpoint. Man, somebody in your family was amazing, right? And we totally don't remember them. We probably never even met them, especially as these years get on and on further removed. But look back, and somebody, and I guarantee this statement is true, somebody in your family built their own home. I'm just humbled, right? What would mine look like? Today, if I had to build my own home, it'd be like 2 sticks in a Walmart bag, right? It'd be me, right? But, get it? I mean, somebody in your family built their own home. They grew all their own food, right? I can't even feed myself on my own property, and we live on 800 acres, right? They made all their own clothes. I would not be standing in front of you in anything that I could make today. And they were able to protect their family against everything that came against them, or else you and I wouldn't even be here today. That's our heritage. Those people poured their blood, sweat, and tears into a better life that we take advantage of today. Our responsibility is to continue that song. I just want to leave with one very personal story. We all know that not everything is rosy, right? Right now. It's full of our civic discourse of the difficulties we're having today. But we've always had difficulties, right? The wheels didn't just fall off the wagon. There has always been discourse. But there's a growing feeling of a lack of hope, right? Will my children have it better than I did? First time it's ever been in question for a long time, right? And so that hope begins to waver. And I submit to you, there's an amazing book written about 3,000 years ago, one of which is called Isaiah. And in chapter 51, it says, "For hope, look to the rock from which you were chiseled, from the quarry from which you were dug." Right? If you look back at what someone has sacrificed for you, that will give you hope that you can do the same thing for the next generation. And we so focus on the negative. That's our power. That's our superpower today, right? We can all pull out a negative newscast at any moment. And so we're constantly inundated with the ripple effects of bad decisions, right? We can see it in our own life. We can see it in our friends' life. We can see it in lives of people we don't even know. Bad decisions and the catastrophic effect it has. But I want to remind you of the power and the ripple effect of good decisions. Good decisions have powerful ripple effects just as much, if not more than, those negative decisions. And I'm going to give you a personal example. So many of you knew my father. It was kind of fun. I told Montserrat on my way out the door of my office today, I caught my eye. There's a plaque there, and it was, my father had won the Robert C. Byrd Civic Responsibility Medal. And although he built the museum about our heritage, he never really explored ours. And when he got sick with cancer, I asked him, Dad, how come? What about our heritage? What about him? He's like, well, I was always scared to talk about it. What happened? He said, well, both of my grandfathers were the town drunks. They had a bunch of kids and ran off. And I was so embarrassed. I didn't want anybody to know. And I said, Dad, that's actually the story you need to tell. Because everybody looks at you and thinks everything has always been hunky-dory and easy. But it's actually his mother, my grandmother, who drew the line in the sand. And when a young Austin Perry, my grandfather, asked her to marry him, she said yes, if. Because she knew about his dad and she knew about her dad. And she knew that both of them only got to go to 8th grade and had to go work in a factory because of the choices their fathers had made. And she said, yes, if. And then she gave him a laundry list of things that they would never do. And she's a pretty tough woman. I'm pretty sure he probably never broke any of those. Or it was a quick reprimand. But anyway, but the point is, because she drew the line in the sand and because he agreed and because they made the right decision, they not only changed their lives, They changed the lives of my dad and my uncle. They changed the lives of me and my sisters. And now they've changed the lives of his grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. You see what I'm saying? In the negativity of our civic discourse, do not be consumed. Remind yourself that good decisions have ripple effects too, and be a part of those more than ever.
Thank you so much, Audie, for those profound words. Brandon prefers to be introduced as Ashley Dennison's husband and father to their boys Owen and Will. Born and raised in West Virginia, he is the founder and CEO of Coalfield Development, which incubates social enterprises designed to diversify Appalachia's coal-based economy and cultivate opportunity for people facing barriers to employment. Dennison graduated from Shepherd College with a BA in History and a BS in Political Science. He holds a Master of Public Affairs degree from Indiana University. In 2017, Brandon was named West Virginian of the Year by West Virginia Living Magazine. In 2016, he was named one of 40 under 40 young leaders who are solving the problems of today by the Chronicle of Philanthropy. He is the winner of the JMK Social Innovation Prize and the DRK and is a DRK Entrepreneur and an Ashoka Fellow. On September 12th of 2019, this year, he received the prestigious 24th Heinz Award in the Technology, the Economy, and Employment category. It's my pleasure to introduce Brandon Dennison.
This is quite a treat. Those first two were, I'm keeping notes here. I'm trying to capture all of this discussion. I want to build on, I love what you're saying, Audie, about the ripples effect of our decisions. And I would even talk about the ripples effect of just our conversations, just our attitude. I am not, history of poli-sci, you heard, so I'm not a scientist, but I read this really interesting article that it was 2 years ago, and it stayed with me, about how a school of fish gets where it goes. And basically on the sides of these fish, they sense movement to their right and to their left. And so the way a school of fish gets where it goes is basically a wisdom of the mass, that is those hundreds or thousands of fish in a school, feeling what's happening on their right and on their left and moving in a certain direction based on that. So there's a certain level to which, by breathing and being within the borders of a land, you are engaged in citizenship, whether you want to be or not. The conversations you're having, the attitude that you're putting out, that is shaping the history of our communities and of our country. I don't think that's an overstatement. The question is, are we aware of that? Are we aware of that power? And if so, then what do we do with it? I was not the coolest kid growing up, and I'm going to prove to you why that's true. From a pretty young age, and it's embarrassing to say this, so this is not something that my goal is to be governor of West Virginia. I liked politics. My father was a professor of journalism at this school. I grew up with newspapers stacked around me and the radio on NPR all the time. And so I would actually write these practice speeches from a pretty young age, if you believe this, and practice these speeches in the mirror of what I would say when I was going to be the governor. And in college, that goal started to change for me. And here's why. I was the youth leader at a Presbyterian church, and we would take an annual camping trip to the Monongahela National Forest. If you've never been there, you must spend some time in the wilderness there. And we decided, and it was very much a group fish skill school sort of decision, that it's really important to protect this landscape. And actually, from a Christian perspective, we've been entrusted to care for this earth, and there's a responsibility to take that stewardship seriously. And so we decided, it was me as a college student and some high school students deciding together, Shepherd's not far from DC, so we lined up meetings with all three, our 2 senators and our congressional representative, to argue for an expansion of the wilderness areas that are protected in the Monongahela area. And what was incredible to me was they listened. I mean, you know, sometimes it's staffers, but they do all the work. You realize it's good for them to listen. And then when the electeds realize they have a group of constituents, more than 10 or 15, well, then they want a picture with you, and they don't want to be looking like the silly doofuses who didn't listen to these young idealistic kids who care about something. And the bill got, it happened. It came to fruition. And so then by being involved in that and some other issues, I realized that generally the politicians are not actually the change agents in our society. The politicians are responding to what the people are demanding. Now that could be through an organized group, that could be as an individual. There's lots of different ways that happens. It almost always involves the mood or the feeling of the constituents, which is really just picked up on in conversations. People to our right, people to our left. And so that's when I decided, I really don't want to be a politician. I really don't want to be governor. I want to work on things that I care about, and I want to be the one who tells the governor, who tells the politicians what they should be caring about and what they should be doing. So I decided to start a nonprofit organization that today is Coalfield Development. We heard about that. And something I'm really proud of at Coalfield Development, we carve out 3 hours every single week for what we call personal development. So we put unemployed people back to work. They work 33 hours a week for solar business, sustainable agriculture business, green collar construction business. Just they get paid like they would for any other job. 6 hours a week, though, they're in college classes, working towards an associate's degree at the community college. And 3 hours a week, we do personal development. And we have 12 themes, and so we lift up one of those themes every single month. And it starts with really care for self. We've got to care for ourselves and be healthy. And that's a part of citizenship, too, that it starts with being the best version of ourselves, I think, before we go start trying to tell other people what to do. But it culminates with citizenship. And this was true before. I didn't change it to be cool for today. This is already true. That of the 12 personal themes, it culminates with citizenship. So the first 6 months are about care for self. Are we being the best version of ourselves? But ultimately, it's not about us. It's about others, and it's about our community, and not taking from our community, but giving back to our community, which I really connect with. And so that's how citizenship has played out for my life. And the last thing that I just thought of, I didn't necessarily, it just came to mind, so I might be misquoting, and there's history professors in the room, which will make me nervous, but I'm pretty sure Thomas Jefferson, I want to talk about the role of education and being a college student, or really just being a lifelong learner. That's key to citizenship too, not just being involved, but being thoughtfully involved and opening ourselves up to people who might think differently from us, and forming educated opinions, and learning, sometimes just for the sake of learning, is very valuable. And essentially, I think Jefferson said that without an educated public, democracy doesn't really work anymore. And he also said something to the effect that what really scared Jefferson about democracy was we get the leaders that we deserve. So it's in our hands. I do vote. I think it does matter. But I also think citizenship is so much more than just voting. It's about how we're engaged in our community. It's even about the conversations we're having and the attitude that we're having, the effects we're having on our right and our left. So what I'll close with is Coalfield Development's vision statement. Is Appalachian places and people unlocking their full potential, power, and purpose. All of us have a unique potential, that we are distinctly capable of and no one else is. It's made up of our personality, our background, our environment, our family, our genes, what we care about, what we experience. We have a unique potential that we're capable of. I would never tell anyone what that was, but I think we should encourage each other to figure that out. Our power lives inside of us, and it's how we actually get to that potential. We all have potential. We don't all achieve it. And the purpose is the so what. And I think this connects back to citizenship. Not just that we're the best version of ourselves, not just that we achieve things, but that we find our purpose and that we give back and give more than we take. So it is an honor to be here. I did have the honor to hear Senator Byrd speak several times, and it is surreal to be on a stage in his honor. And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. All right, we appreciate that greatly. And now, finally, with the final word from this first round in our program today is Jennifer Wells. Jennifer Wells is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, who moved to Huntington in 2005 in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. She earned a bachelor's degree from Marshall University and a master's in social work from WVU. Wells is executive director of the West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families Coalition, a position she took in 2015. She is an exceptional organizer and social worker with over 15 years' experience in child welfare, juvenile justice, health care, program development, anti-poverty, social justice, and racial justice endeavors. Jennifer brings a skilled and multi-layered lens to social justice work and organizing. She currently serves as West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy Board President, is President-elect of the West Virginia chapter of the National Association of Social Workers, West Virginia State Chair of CARE, and is State Legislative Coordinator for the NAACP of West Virginia. She was named the 2018 West Virginia Social Worker of the Year. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jennifer Wells.
Thank you. I'm going to make one small correction in my biography. I probably wrote it and wasn't very clear. I actually assumed the executive directorship in 2018. I actually joined West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families Coalition in 2015, and it was one of the best things to happen to me. So I just wanted to say that. Actually, my civic responsibility, my civic engagement and participation is exemplified on the stage, and I don't know if my fellow panelists even realize this, but in West Virginia, where a new energy infused me, and I'll get into that in just a little bit, Dr. Denman, we are on the Women's Caucus together, and that is a group, an organization that seeks to engage women and support women in particular as they seek public office and other areas of civic engagement. I work with Brandon and Coalfield, and we get to do some amazing things on the ground and build grassroots leadership, and it's one of the passions of my life, and I happen to get paid for it, so it's exciting. And I get to work with amazing people too. And then with Adi, we actually volunteer for the past couple of years with, is it the Makers Festival, and the ability to lend an ear and eye and a little bit of judgment to the next group of entrepreneurs that are serving and growing in West Virginia. It's just amazing. When I got the honor, I got the email, and by the way, Montserrat, it was amazing to get that email in May, and I am so honored to be here. But then to see my fellow panelists and realize, hey, this is kind of a glimpse into my civic engagement, and how exciting is it that I can actually say that. And then as I figured, by being the last person to speak, that these great folks would come up with great ideas and say great things that were somewhat reflective of what I wanted to say today. So I apologize if I'm a little bit redundant, but I'm going to try to be bring a little something fresh to this conversation. When I received the email, looked into the question and went back into my life as a student, which I consider myself to be until the day I die. And it was an assignment to some degree, and an important assignment. But it also seemed a little bit overwhelming. This responsibility, civic responsibility. How can in 10 minutes I describe what that really means? How can I build something that resonates? I'm also always going to tell a personal story. That's the only way I know how to operate. And so I said, I'll do that, but then I still have to bring something a little bit deeper than myself to this. And in looking through some theories, and I've got just enough in political science, I minored in it here at Marshall to be dangerous, so to speak. And so what I came out, as I started reading back through some of the folks' mills and a bunch of political philosophers, was that certain pieces of their theories and their words resonate with me, but they didn't completely. Not one philosopher said everything. And so I had to pull from this person and from that person to really land on where I stood as a citizen and what I believe citizenship is and what I believe civic responsibility is. And what it brought to me was civic responsibility. I see us as nesting eggs. So the very center is the individual. Surrounding that is the family. Surrounding that is the community, then the nation, then the world. And that each nesting egg influences and is a recipient from the other. The individual influences the family influences the individual, the community influences both, the state influences both, the nation, and then the world. And so even as an individual, I have a responsibility to the world, and I have to find the way that I can best contribute. And that brought me to another thought, that civic participation, civic engagement, and even the responsibility is not a stagnant nor linear line, that it cycles out. And how that becomes personal to me is lived experience creates that influence, that balance, that nurturing, and that expression out, me to my family back to me, and then thus forth and on. And my lived experience with Katrina, some folks ask when I'm able to talk about it, how are you comfortable talking about it? Some people are a little bit hesitant even to ask me about it, because it's a trauma, and not wanting to intrude is very respectful, and I appreciate it. But as I experienced it, even in the depths of it, and as I survived and as me and my family thrived, I had a responsibility, having lived through it, to thus speak of it and speak of the causes, the root causes, the abilities to get through it, the resiliency that I saw while I was surrounded with other survivors, and how we need to progress as a community, as a country, as a world. That was part of my civic responsibility. I took it serious. Because I also know I had some skills. I'm an extrovert with some introverted tendencies. And so therefore I'm able to be out in the public more so than some folks that I live with, my family. My mom and my brother, not so much. They didn't feel it. So I took on the ownership of saying, here's who we are, here's where we came from, here are our strengths, here's the community that I came from strength, and I will always claim New Orleans, it is my home. But then I found a new home. And how would I represent in my new home? Who would I be? How would I show up? What agency would I bring? And I was able to then delve into something that I hadn't done before 2005 as a professional. And how I circle back to how civic responsibility engagement is not linear is I was asked about a year ago from somebody that I deeply respect and whose opinion I often run to when I have questions, what were you like in 2005? And I was like, it wasn't this Jennifer. It wasn't this person, but that was okay. When I look at the Jennifer that was in 2004, if you want to talk about her, she was also engaged. She took also a responsibility. Maybe she was a little bit more intimate in her reach. Maybe it was just the fact that it was assisting and supporting and aiding my mother and making certain that her life and her quality of life was excellent. And guess what? For folks that aren't ready to burst out into the world and be on magazine covers or take over organizations, that's okay. Because what you're providing to this world is extremely important. A solid family that can engage in a community, that can build. We go down back to the layers. Each one is no more important than the other. Each individual in this country is no more important than the other. We want to fall back on a Constitution. It's a document. It's written. But the theme and the environment that it states to create must always be one of dialogue and interaction. And going back to the lifelong student piece, it is a responsibility of myself as an individual, my family as a whole, my community, to nurture that education. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be in the fact that my grandmother fought for the right to vote, which she didn't have when she was born. And telling the story and reminding my mother, who reminded me, who then I now am responsible to pass that story on, to let it land and signify how important certain rights that are given to us are, and also how much sacrifice has been gone on before us to make it happen. I think of three things if we are to connect and nurture and influence each other as we scale out. And the three things that I landed on were, first, mutual respect, and then critical thinking. The rights, the responsibilities, the ability for me to sit here in this room, in this space, as a black woman was not automatically given. But critical thinking and folks that were able to resist, to question, to challenge, those were my heroes. They allowed me to be here. That is something that I have to echo out. It is always going to be my responsibility in my work, in my personal life, in my low-key community world, where I don't want folks to know what I do for a living, but they just recognize me as a tutor, which I've enjoyed so much. That's my responsibility. It's to pass on the education that I have been lucky enough to have that another may not be lucky enough to afford at the moment. I can share that information. And that is indeed my responsibility. And for those that are privileged enough to have it, it's also your responsibility. It really is. So critical thinking and mutual respect allows us as a country to value our culture, to understand and appreciate other folks' culture, and still question in a respectful manner. The other part that I came to was accountability. We should all be accountable. I'm accountable to my family. I'm accountable to my husband. I'm accountable to my community. My community is accountable to me. And making certain that is always in play, that we never allow it to rest, that we never allow it to be stagnant, is the biggest piece that I landed on when I thought, what is civic responsibility? We often think of voter engagement and voter registrations and political office, and those are extremely important in democracy, but simply living and being and talking and questioning, that's what keeps the wheels moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I believe this mic, is this mic working? Can you hear this? Okay. So that was very, very interesting, very profound. I really appreciate these 4 statements that have been made by our panelists today. And in the time remaining, I would like to initiate a conversation that includes the audience. And I'm going to come down with the microphone, and we're just going to have a question and answer session. And at the end, I've got some gifts and some awards to present you with. So. I'd like to know who would like to pose a question to our panelists, and I'll pass them a mic. Okay, great. Could you stand up and tell us your name?
Hi, I'm Sydney Adkins, and my question is more specifically for Dr. Denman. You spoke about the importance of listening to others' opinions even if you don't agree with them. However, in the current world where there's a rise in extremist hate groups, do you believe there is a point where opinions should no longer be listened to because of their danger?
Am I on?
Yes.
Actually, no. I think you always have to listen to other people, but I think listening does not mean agreement. But we have to listen because we won't understand where people are coming from if we don't listen to their opinions. I think that we live in a world today where the whole concept of civil discourse has been lost. We need to get back to that. I feel very strongly about that, but I don't think by quitting listening will be the answer. I think what we've got to do is to find a place where reasonable people can talk, have disagreement, that they have to, like this book that I'm reading, I think that you're wrong, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to listen. It doesn't mean I'm going to change my view, but we have to, as a city, as families, as a city, as a country, we're better than what's happening right now. We need to be able to discuss our differences, bring them to the table, and find some common ground where we can move forward and make this a better place for the next generation. Never quit listening. And I think that what we have to do is to remember that there's a William Butler Yeats poem about the extremes and for the center to hold, the extremes pull. We need to be the center where we are saying, I will listen to you and I will listen to you. But we have got to come together as a community, as a country, and we've got to listen to each other, because you won't understand where they're coming from if you don't listen to them. But listening does not mean acceptance. And you need to be thinking how you can articulate why there are differences. Discourse is what we need, but it needs to be civil.
Thank you, Sarah. Who would like to pose the second question here this afternoon? Okay. Thank you. If you could share your name with the audience.
Good afternoon. My name's Gail Brazeau. My question to the audience is that as we look at the news and the media has become so polarized, and if part of our job is to be able to learn, how do we decipher, we find that media is one side or the other. We get very hard opportunity to really understand what really is the true story. I wanted some of your thoughts on how we're going to deal with some of the challenges associated with the media that's so polarized.
I have a quick thought on that because it's my mentor gave me a tip on this that I'll never forget. If every article you read or every news segment you watch, you find yourself nodding and agreeing, you are then stuck in an echo chamber and you're just reinforcing what you already think. And it feels good to reinforce what we already think. That feels good. But my mentor said, if you really want to be serious about learning and empathy and understanding where someone else is coming from, you're going to have to start reading things and watching things that make you go, whoa, I don't know about that. I don't think I agree with that. And again, by watching that and reading that doesn't mean you agree with everything you watch and you read. But it deepens your learning and your understanding and your empathy, and it forces you to defend your opinions in new and more vigorous and more concrete and clear ways.
And I'll piggyback on that as well. And also it's something that was said to me by a mentor, and it was actually in a research class, and it was being able to read a peer-reviewed journal and still hold back full acceptance. Just because it was written, just because it was accepted, doesn't mean it's not without question. Were the questions posed properly? How many folks actually were interviewed? If it was a focus group, where were they interviewed? Can all determine in some regards the answers you're going to get and the conclusions you're going to come to. And so it was, we were told, and it is something that I live with at this moment, in how I consume the news. I am not passive, I'm active. So I watch the news and have sometimes turned it off for my own self-care and mental health, because I watch how many stories are being played about the same subject matter when I know there was something bigger going on in the world. And so I know that there's a consumerism and there's a dollar sign behind how some things are going to be portrayed to us, because commercial dollars are involved. And so even having that piece of information as I'm watching it, deciphering it, dissecting it, there's nothing that I take, even from folks that I agree with, as full-on truth. So I'm like, there's always something, there is implicit and explicit biases in everything, and that I have to read and consume knowing that is happening.
I think that you have to, what you're saying, you have to make yourself uncomfortable. You have to go to those places that don't agree with you and that you don't agree with them. I mean, I read all kinds of different publications. I listen to various news sources, make myself listen to some of news channels that I don't even want to listen to, but I can't understand if I don't do that. But I will defend the media all the time because I really believe what it says at the top of the Washington Post: democracy dies in darkness. We have to read what's going on. We have to listen to what's going on, but we have to be willing and open to listen to different points of view.
My just comment goes back to something that Jennifer said, and I really want to. So often our brain is drawn to the shiny light way up there, like the big, right? You know, the national issue, and all those are important. But I would submit, if you're getting overwhelmed by what you're watching or reading or whatever on this grand scale, go have a real conversation with another human being, face to face, that potentially you may or may not agree with. And I bet you will learn more about what reality looks like. And I don't mean that as a disenfranchisement from the national, I'm not saying that, but we tend toward those global issues when our roommate 10 feet away could provide us a lot of learning if we would just invite them into our lives.
Thank you, I agree 100%. All right, I'm ready for a third question from the audience. Okay, here you go.
Hello, my name is Morgan Johnson, and my question has to do with technology and civil discourse. It struck me that you said, Mrs. Jennifer Wells, that you said civic discourse kind of phases in and out. And I like how the Constitution is constantly in a dialogue that's like implying that there has to be a response at all times. There's always a conversation happening. And I think my question is, how do you think technology today, with our increasing reliance on technology, will affect our civil discourse? And I'm talking in terms of digital activism, where people are always talking about, I don't know, Sudan, but there's nothing they're actually doing about helping Sudan. How do you feel about us retweeting problems about our government, or tweeting Trump's tweets, or anything of that nature, but not really doing anything except spreading the word? Is that enough for civil discourse? Should we be adding something else? I'm really curious as to how you guys feel about that.
So I know that there was a funny Saturday Night Live skit where there was somebody on the couch solving world problems by liking certain things on social media, and then like when I saw that skit, it like hit my soul. I'm like, yes. And the beautiful part was when the guy like stood up with victory hands and he was like, I did it. I liked and shared that story. So there, it's all done. What I think is that there has to be a balance. So like for my organization, which is organizing across the state and even working on federal issues, the ability in West Virginia to reach folks we never would be able to touch because we're a staff of 7 is an amazing tool that we need to learn how to use better. Being able to get good information, solid facts, really good campaigns out is now easier. It's also dangerous because now I have Wikipedia at my fingertips. I could be spouting some bad facts. And so the whole idea of balancing what I read, going deeper into a subject. The next step is when we digitally organize and are using our organization's social media platform, now heightening our image, allowing more people to know we exist, to come to us. It's all about how we then propel them and engage them into action. There actually is a theory called the ladder of civic engagement. And so if I start with somebody liking our page or liking our comments, then we like hunt that person down on social media, and it's like, okay, not only just like that comment, like us, and then not only just like us, let's have a conversation, and what we plan personally as an org is that we will actually sit down with this person at some point in time face to face to say, what do you want for your community? What do you want for your life? And then, like, what will you be willing to commit to? And let's move you along that line and get you actively involved. And so there's always, there's a yin and a yang to everything. And so the idea is that it allows us to reach more people, but then they're also able in that process to hopefully get them to act, to get off, put the phone down, stand and look face to face with folks. Nothing is more powerful than being in someone else's presence and in a group. There's so much power in numbers, but hopefully that answered a little bit.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? All right. Love hearing from students.
Sorry, I have a second question. So, Mr. Dennison spoke about how achieving one's best self will benefit democracy. However, do you all believe there's a difference between what one believes is their best self and then the version of their best self that will actually benefit democracy? And how do we as people combine these two visions to be a better citizen?
Probably so. I mean, that's a great question. Is what we think is our best self, is that our true best self? And I think all of us, to Audie's point, none of us have achieved anything we've done on our own. None of us. And so, meaning what we've achieved is because of the positive influences of lots and lots of others, some that we know and can name, some that we don't even know and didn't even know were working on our behalf. And so the way we discover our potential, the best version of ourselves, is through community. Right? And through civic discourse within that community. So some of my best friends, I think, in trying to figure out my potential, which there's a philosophical answer, which is we never totally figure that out. You know, there is no finish line in that. But as I look back on my life, some of the greatest gifts are people who are brave enough to speak directly to me, not being mean, but honestly saying, you know, that didn't go very well, Brandon, and here's why that didn't go well, or that was a mistake, or, you know, that paper really, you think you're brilliant, but that wasn't very cogent. Or the professor that at the time you think is so mean. But that criticism is what kind of sharpens us in the fire. And so, which leads to the conclusion that if we're not opening ourselves up to criticism, if we're not open to hear viewpoints that are different from the viewpoints we already have, then we're probably not going to figure out that full potential. And we're going to stay in our caves, and our view's going to stay narrow, and our horizon will not be wide enough.
I honestly believe, maybe naive, that every day you have the opportunity to become your better self, and that we evolve over our entire lifetime. If I was judged on my better self for the first 25 years of my life, I'd be, you know, my head would be hanging down low. I think we all evolve. I think that we have this idea of what our better self will be, but fortunately, life gives us the opportunity every day to become a better person. And I think a lot of that's through civic engagement and service, and just being a part of the community in which you live allows you that unbelievable opportunity every day when you wake up.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to add also that this conversation that we're having today, I think absolutely contributes to the general effort on our part as members of the Marshall University community to become better people each day. So I appreciate that. I think we have time for one more questions before moving forward to the closing portions of this program. I think you're the student today. We're all students of life.
I don't know if I need this. I'm an introvert whose job is to be an extrovert. But so first of all, let me say, listening to Montserrat sort of talk about Jennifer's accomplishments was much more evidence than I really needed. I've been here a long time. So, you know, thanks. But congratulations. So as a political scientist and someone who thinks about democracy a lot, I worry about democracy. And my worry has very little to do with what's happening right now. My worry has to do with the fact that, over the last 30 years at least, probably longer, we've had this sort of situation in the United States where there are a minority of people, many of whom are in this room, most of whom are educated, that engage in incredible acts of civic engagement. There's another group of people who show up every, an occasional Tuesday in November and vote and then go back to doing whatever they do the rest of their lives, which is very demanding. And then there's perhaps the majority of people who aren't engaged. And I think it's easy to say that those people are stupid or they're apathetic, but I think it's more complicated. And I think there's a lot of people who don't feel, political scientists use this word, political efficacy, they don't feel like they can actually make a difference, right? And I think that leads to those other things. So I guess my question for all of you, or whoever wants to answer, is that seems the really hard part for me. How do we, as people who are civically engaged, involve, create an environment where those who are not feel like they can actually make a difference? So.
Thank you, George, for that profound question. That's George Davis from the Political Science Department. Panel, please.
George, the one word that comes to my mind when I hear your heart on that is that hope. I mean, if I don't have hope, I begin to disengage. And we throw that word around so easily, like, it's a magic word. But and maybe that's my theme now, it begins with that one-on-one interaction. The person, we're speaking about somebody who's probably not in this room, so we need to be careful. We're talking about a group of people that we're not, I'm not actually interviewing right here. But that ability for someone, most of us are here because someone poured into us. Honest truth. It may have been your parent, but most honestly, it was somebody who didn't owe you a dime. You kind of expect your parents to step up for you. Some don't, but right? But somebody, and when I said that, you probably thought of that person. Somebody stepped out of what they're required to do and gave a flip about you. And that changed your course. And as crazy as that sounds, and as difficult as that sounds about this unknown group of people in democracy that seem like the weight of the majority, and we fear that the wheels are falling off, that we can't control it, the one thing we can control is go find your one person. And let those ripple effects take care of themselves. And maybe when that one person gets their wheels back on, go to the next, right? And I know that feels simplistic in the answer, but that's how it all got started, right? This document that we're celebrating was single conversations happening throughout a countryside of a little country across tavern tables about, do you think we can do this? And they were peasant cast-offs. I mean, we like to celebrate them as heroes, but in the eyes of the king, they were nobodies.
George, I think that's an awfully good point, and I think that there's no quick answer to that. I think that sometimes there is such negativity today that feeds on a hopelessness that no matter how hard you try, you're not going to make a difference. That we have to try harder to engage people and to prove to them that you can make a small difference, and a small difference becomes a bigger difference. I mentioned in my talk, I'm a child of the 60s, so I think back to when they first started some of those programs where we had AmeriCorps and we had Vista Volunteers, in which they went into rural parts of this country to engage people at a really ground zero level, to get them involved in their community and show you might not be able to make a difference in your state, but you can make a difference in your town. And you can, and I think we need to go back out. Now, I think that, as Dickens said, this is the best of times and the worst of times. Technology is at the best of times and the worst of times. It can help us tremendously, but it hinders us tremendously too, because it makes it too easy to not get up and go out. And I think sometimes we need to get up and go out and start engaging people at where their issues are and where they need to see a difference. I don't have the answer to that. I really don't. But I have the belief that it can be done. I do think that if we can show people what it can do, that you can make a difference, that then maybe we're able to begin to turn people from that negativity to see that civic engagement can help them.
And that intentionality, that it's not enough to say, well, people aren't engaged. And I think sometimes we implicitly make mistakes in why that might be. Well, they're not educated, or they're bitter, or whatever. And so what I'm hearing both in both cases with audience there is that intentionality, it's not enough to say, well, it's too bad they're disengaged, I wonder why. There has to be an outreach, working harder to go to places that feel disenfranchised, to go with people who feel disconnected, and work even harder to find a point of connection, to find some sense of engagement.
So I'll wrap that question up. And by the way, I was in Dr. Davis's class in 2008, I believe. So yeah, we dated on that. But I look in the work that I do to Harlan County, Kentucky right now. And was there, or at least was hearing the threads of what was happening. And for those who don't know, coal mine shut down, bankruptcy, vacated, left the folks that work there that deserve their pay without pay, and no answers as to when they would ever get pay. And I just want to know, as an organizer and someone that works in strategy now, like, how did you guys, was it happenstance? Did somebody just see the coal car, the train that went in to collect the coal that had already been mined and was now going to be taken out for profit, but yet then still they had not paid those coal miners, that echoed the word around that small community, this is what they're doing, let's stand. But I know, probably with some good assumption, and that's never a great thing, that politically I probably don't match up to the folks that are in that county on a bunch of levels, but that their action inspired me to do my job better. But then I wait, I'm like, why isn't this a bigger story? Why are not even my people that fight in these same battles wanting to ride out? So like, why aren't we riding out? And it was that apathy, that moment, that paused me and said, this is how much work we have to do. This is how much the fact that when an unjust moment was being rectified by normal, everyday working Americans, we didn't all pick up and run to stand with them. And that's where I see the biggest piece of our work needing to be. And in both racial justice work, the work that we do in economic justice, pedagogy of the oppressed is now becoming an even more important piece of work for me to read. And to try to undo the internalized oppression that we live and walk in, that allows us to become more and more apathetic, that allows us to believe that we cannot move a mountain simply because we gather our neighbor and we gather our families, and then we go and stand with someone we don't even know simply because it's the right thing to do. So I am hoping that that becomes something that we can work towards.
Thank you very much. Mike, thank you very, very much. This has been a very interesting conversation. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. I really appreciate your time and your effort and your thoughts. It's very inspiring to hear about your dedication to the communities and from these very different perspectives, and I see a tremendous and important common ground amongst the four of you, and that is that while it's very reasonable for us to be skeptical at all times, it's part of our intellectual tradition, our responsibilities as citizens, it is not acceptable to drift into cynicism. And by reaching out to other individuals in our communities and trying to make a difference, we can stay hopeful and share that hope with others. And so I greatly appreciate your time today. I'd like each of the 4 panelists to step forward so that I can present them with awards and gifts, and then I'd like to invite the audience, after we have presented the awards and the gifts to the panelists, to a reception in the foyer of the Jones C. Edwards Playhouse. And I'd like to thank Charlotte Boyce, James Morris-Smith, Deb Carter-Dean, Kevin Bannon, and the entire, Jeremy Wright, the entire crew. They do just a great job in this building, and a great job